Kia ora, g'day, and welcome to the Select Committee, Maxim Institute's weekly politics wrap. We go beyond the headlines to explain the stories that matter, and we tell you the ones that you don't need to bother with so much. Politics can be hard to follow and even harder to make sense of, and that's why we're breaking it down, covering top stories and highlighting what was missed, and what it might mean. And finally, at the end of it, if you love your sport, we get off the back bench with Maxim's Fantasy Politics League, where we pick up the week's best performance in the media and in the House. And welcoming Marianne and Thomas. Great to see you here. Thanks for joining us. Let's get things kicking off. I went to the supermarket yesterday. Everything was far too expensive. New Zealand First's got a remedy for that, Thomas. Fill us in.
They do indeed. So Winston Peters has come out in this past week and he is arguing that we should break up the supermarket duopoly. So we have two major supermarket companies here in New Zealand, Progressive and Foodstuffs, and he's saying that Foodstuffs, which run Pack and Save and New World and a few other brands, they should not be one big company. They have too much power. We should force them to split up. Pack and Save and New World should be different companies.
Okay. Well, yeah, that sounds like that's going to resonate, Marianne.
Yeah, it sounds like somebody's doing something.
Yeah.
The question is, are they doing something that will actually bring prices down? I mean, the bigger these companies get, the easier it is for them to disadvantage smaller competitors. So if they're smaller, the theory is, I think, they will have less power to do that. But the behaviors that actually disadvantage competitors and limit competition, this doesn't really address those at all. So you've got things like the retail grocery market study 4 years ago now, advised making more land available for new grocery stores, changing planning laws to free up sites. So apparently that's a thing. That's one of the reasons there's less competition.
Right, because when you buy a supermarket, no one's allowed to build a supermarket around. I think that's what those.
And you've got land banking by some of the big.
Yeah.
So a couple of the problems that currently exist is often, it's not so much that there is an absolute prohibition on building a supermarket, but often as part of the resource consent process, supermarkets are required to do some economic modelling to demonstrate there is in fact demand for the supermarket, which really is quite strange when you think about it. It's odd that businesses have to prove to regulators that they can make a profit before they can open up their business. Imagine if we did that for any other form of shop. Imagine if, for your local sports supplies shop, they had to go to the regulator and say, look, we think people want to buy soccer balls
in this area.
Exactly. It's a cost, and then there's kind of a range of restrictive covenants as well, which make it harder for new players to enter into the market.
Yeah. So that you've got in the UK, the Grocery Code Adjudicator. It made a very kind of surgical intervention to, like with Tesco, disadvantaging suppliers by squeezing them, and it put specific constraints dealing with those specific problems in place. So
did it work?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, it helped.
Yeah.
And that's the thing with these issues is you're always going to have the attempt to be as close to a monopoly as possible by everybody who's in the market. So breaking them up slows that down. Does it change the actual behaviours that are reducing competition? Not necessarily.
And does it bring prices down, which is that's all I care about when I'm at the supermarket with my trolley and looking, over here and over there. I think this has been happening. Some of this has been happening in Australia, and it's not clear that prices have gone down. I think Consumer New Zealand was stating that. What's your take, Thomas?
Well, I'm very, very sceptical of this, and for a range of reasons.
We were only mildly sceptical. You're very sceptical.
Well, I think you need to be able, if you're wanting to bring prices down, you have to articulate why and how they are higher than they should be.
Yeah.
They're saying that these are too big as companies. I would observe that supermarkets under New World and Pack and Save brands are independently owned, so they're in competition with one another. They are a co-op that shares a single brand.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, I drive past the New World because it's more expensive. Sorry, New World. Than the Pack and Save.
Exactly. And I think it's often, particularly in big cities like Auckland, getting out of date anyway that there are only two companies. We do some shopping at Pack and Save. We also go to Taiping. No one's talking about this because, obviously out in the regions where there are fewer competitors, it's not to say that we
explain what Taiping is for those who don't have it.
It's another supermarket. It, primarily targets Asian consumers. It has a different range of products, but it is a supermarket in every sense of the word. It has fresh produce, it has packaged produce, it has frozen stuff. It's a full-scale supermarket. It's as large as your typical New World or Countdown or Pack and Save. So there are other options out there. But also, if we break up these companies, sure, there might be some more competition, but you also lose economies of scale. And so there are two forces that work counterbalance to one another. And there's no reason to think that politicians in Wellington have a better sense of which one is going to be more important.
Okay, well, thanks, guys. And there's your supermarket tip. If you're in one of the main centres, Taiping, you're welcome.
We're not sponsored, but if they want to sponsor this podcast,
guys,
Taiping
Well, while we're on
supermarkets.
it, Farmer's Box,
Yep.
cheaper veg than Pack and Save.
There we go. Another one from Marianne.
Another one.
And if sponsorship's something on your mind, give
Here
us
we
a
go.
call at Maxim. Let's move from a supermarket to the political market with the Greens in terms of a sort of, I suppose, a ethical / ideological market that they inhabit. Now, interesting thing about the Greens, they released their State of the Planet policy release, sort of setting the tone for the election year just this week. And let's just note about where the Greens are in terms of the last, the Greens April average, for example, based on latest Talbot Mills Corporate and Taxpayers Union Courier polls, they're on 7.4% at the moment. Now, that's 4 points down from their 2023 election result. They seem to be suffering, Marianne, and we're just talking about markets. Do you think that's got something to do with it?
Yeah, they're in a crowded market. I mean, if you're a party where your brand is about being green, and 20 years on, all the other parties are also talking about things that could be green. How do you differentiate yourself? And I think the way they're doing it.
So what you're saying is everyone started singing the same song as them, so they don't stand
we
out
all
anymore.
want to save the planet. We all want conservation to be a thing. How we get there is the question. And for the Greens, Chloe's saying, we don't have to trade off between fixing the cost of living crisis, the fossil fuel crisis, and the climate crisis. They are the same problem. So this is very on brand for the Greens. There are no trade-offs. We can have utopia. And then the solution is so simple. We must electrify everything we can. We need homegrown, sustainable resilience in our energy system, powering everything we do. That sounds great to everyone, but she's just glossing over, like, her solution needs solutions. Glossing
So there
over
needs
the
to
issue
be-
of, well, how are we going to expand the grid? If everybody's got an EV, how are we disposing of things? What about the roads with the higher impact? Like, there's just a whole list of issues that need addressing. And now they are proposing subsidies for
Solar
vehicles
power.
and solar
But-
power.
so-
Well, that's
yeah, yeah.
subsidizing people who can afford their own homes and subsidizing people who can afford new cars. So their solutions aren't actually without big problems. It's a crowded market. if you're green.
It's a crowded market. Thomas, I actually heard a discussion between Chloe Swarbrick, Green Co-leader, and David Seymour just this morning, and there was a rare moment of, I think they described it as kumbaya, where they were both like, yeah, we do need more electrification, and they went into one that was particularly interesting to me was geothermal, and praising the use of new geothermal technology to increase our ability to produce electricity, which is what we need as a country. Now, that rings a bell, because didn't you do a paper on something along the same lines just for Maxim Institute?
I did indeed. So yeah, geothermal energy is already a major player in our electricity market, but there's a lot of room to expand it. And so it's good to see political parties agreeing and recognizing that geothermal is something we can go in. And so we have a lot of what you'd call conventional geothermal, but the government has invested $60 million into research for what is called supercritical geothermal. So going deeper, getting more power, and that's kind of cutting edge technology. We would be world leaders in that market if we continue to develop that technology. Where they probably do get to break down is what role government has to play in something like a geothermal market. ACT Party will be wanting to place a high
the
value on property rights.
Yep.
If you own the land, you can dig a hole and generate electricity if you want, but the government should try and stay out of the way. The Greens are probably much more open to a state-led investment approach. But I think if you are a Greens political strategist at the moment, you should probably be feeling a bit frustrated with how well the party's doing, simply because we've had over the last couple of months, some bad weather events, and then a cost of living crisis driven by fossil fuel prices. Now, say what you will about various policy interventions, those are core issues for the Greens. They should be able to make a lot of hay while the sun is shining or raining, or however it goes. But it seems like their issues should be on the front foot, and they're not quite getting the cut through they want. So they do have some big questions going into election year. How can they focus on what really matters to their voters?
Yeah, I wonder if some of that stuff might tick up, say, in some of the May polls, for example. We'll see about that. From a crowded market to a soap opera, the Chris Luxon leadership brouhaha, although brouhaha seems small, this seems like it's been going on for almost months and months and months. And of course, there was the confidence vote this week, and Luke Malpass, which by the way, the Prime Minister won, and then went out to the media and said, I won, I'm not going to talk about it, #mic drop. Here's the thing though, the media is really good at picking up microphones. What do we think is going to happen next? Because Luke Malpass, for example, from the Post says the vote was won, but the problem was not solved. Thomas.
Yeah, I think he's landing on something quite important there. I think good move from Luxon to take a vote of confidence in himself as an attempt to put it to bed. You put the gun on the table and say, who wants to pick it up and have a go? And you lay down the challenge, because what they've had...
Can I push back on that, though? Because he was forced to do that by this collection, this narrative, Marianne, that was just going on and on. Oh, he's going to get rolled this week. Oh, no, it wasn't this week. Okay, he's going to get rolled in a week and a half, etc. So it's a mixture on that.
Yeah, I mean, is news if nothing's happened?
Yeah.
I remember...
but wait, something might be happening. Can you hear the whispering?
If we talk about it enough, it might happen.
Yeah.
It took me back to Fiji many years ago. I spent a few weeks there working on a project. While I was there was an attempted coup. Not a leadership change, but an actual, the government might be overthrown. Yeah. And so there were military with semi-automatics at intersections, and, I was just a visitor and I knew what was going on. There was this brilliant interview on the evening news where a reporter asked a government official who was standing outside the gates of whatever the official building was, with the guards there with the rifles, why are there military stationed here with rifles? Well, we can do that. They're there sometimes, yes, but they're not usually there. Why are they there today? We can put them there if we want to. And they went around in circles, and nobody said the word coup. And the reporter was looking for a story, and the other person couldn't voice what everybody in the country knew. Yeah. This brought me back to that, and I think Lux did the right thing in basically saying, look, there's nothing more to talk about, and not even stay to answer questions, because I think, ironically, that's what people are looking for from him, is to go, no, look, I'm calling the shots here. I'm the leader. This is what I'm doing, and I'm not going to talk about this anymore because, as he said, it's a soap opera.
It's a soap opera, and political tragics like us will be fascinated by this and we'll click. But we go back to the supermarkets. Is it, when you're standing in the supermarket trying to decide what breakfast cereal to buy based on price, you're not going to be thinking about who's leading the National Party or the government, Thomas.
Yeah, I think voters really don't like it when political parties are talking about themselves. If you're, getting all introspective and issues inside the Beltway.
What about when schmucks like us talk about political parties?
Well, we're in the think tank game. We decided we didn't want to be liked, so we do that because we have nothing better to do. But I think in general, people don't follow this stuff that closely. But if they get a sense that that's what the politicians are focusing on, they're not following the details, but they don't like that it's looking into Wellington as opposed to out to where people are actually living. But I think Luxon made a good move, trying to put it to bed, but I think Luke Malpass is onto something that I'm not sure he will succeed, because we're pretty late into election year. Like, it's already April, and the government was kind of, they're muddling the way along, and then a fuel crisis hit, which wasn't their fault. They've done some things to try and handle it, but they're on shaky ground, and they're having to deal with this. So Luxon will hope it gets put to bed. If they don't talk about it again and they really do unite, he probably has done a good job. But if it still keeps simmering, it doesn't matter that he's technically the leader. They're going to be in a tough spot.
What do you think, Marianne? Have we seen the last of this, or is it going to carry on?
I don't think we have, because it's an election year, and because the the gates have been open to this topic.
Yeah.
I don't know what Luxon could do to take it completely off the table.
And look, the latest One News Variant poll, centre-right cannot govern. There's going to be, and that's just one poll. So that's one thing I think to remember when a poll comes out. You want, okay, you know what? I want 3 of those results before I think it's a trend. But yeah, this is probably not going to go away. Which leads us to the Maxim scientific proprietary technology that has produced the fantasy league of politics. Thomas, tell us more.
Yes, what we're looking to do here is find a way to analyse how politicians are doing at their own jobs. They're trying to pass laws, they're trying to contribute to parliamentary process, but they're trying to get to media cut-through as well, to upscale their brand. So what we've done is we've developed a very, very scientific algorithm to see how well are politicians doing. And that's based on parliamentary contributions, bills introduced if they're in government, questions asked if they're in opposition, and then as well as their media hits and cut through. And then we have a modifier as well, the voter impression and broad evaluation score, vibes. Because what politicians do...
Vibes, so this is just something that we can make up.
We read the tea leaves. No, it's not something we make up.
Leaves.
It's recognizing that not all media cut through is created equal, that
true.
Some politicians believe that there is no such thing as bad publicity. We would suggest that sometimes not all coverage is made equal.
Yeah.
But we're trying to evaluate how well politicians are doing. So we're picking 3 MPs each week, a government MP, an opposition MP, and then a backbencher. And we're going to see how well they do and who's really getting cut through.
Okay, and look, this is my introduction for my picks of the week. Shane Jones, Chris Hipkins, and Tamitha Paul. Now, the reason I picked these guys was because Parliament's not sitting at the moment, and these are seasoned media players. I remember when I used to do talkback, if I just repeated something that Shane Jones said, I'd get 40 minutes of calls, just no question. And he's done it again this week, talking about the quote-unquote butter chicken tsunami, where New Zealand first been trying to critique the free trade agreement with India. So he got a lot of attention then. Was it good attention? Not really sure. Chris Hipkins benefited from that because he got to scold him and tell him off. And so obviously changing a narrative it's interesting. Labor's been quite silent on some issues, but able to come forth on this one. So it's a win for both of them, I think, and that's the wider drama of political theatre. Tamitha Paul, when she was the one doing the introduction for the Green Party State of the Planet. And let's just pause and listen to what she had to deal with in the other room. So, pause.
Tēnā tātou.
Okay, so everyone's talking. You're at a party trying to get things going, and everyone's had 2.5 drinks, and they're going murmur, 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 murmur. So I salute Tamitha Paul for, there is courage, but there's also resolve, and she kept going. She set it up for her 2 co-leaders. Well done. Thomas?
Yeah, well, I think you've done a really good job. If you can pick both sides of the political argument, with Shane Jones and Chris Hipkins, you get a lot of points. And I think it identifies that politicians benefit from being in the pantomime of the drama, even if they have different views, right? And so both Shane Jones and Chris Hipkins did well. I had a bit of a mixed week. Christopher Luxon was on my books, and he got a lot of media hits.
Got a lot of hits.
Yeah, 10 points on his media metric.
Yeah. I can see Mary Ann's looking over.
I'm taking notes for next week. I'm learning how to play this game.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, so you reckon Chris Luxon's media hits, are they good for him or bad for him?
Yeah, I see how your calculations are going to have to be interesting here because they're probably majority bad.
It's true. I was thinking what I was really hoping for.
Because these are questions about his leadership, the essence of what he is. He is there fundamentally as the leader of the National Party, Prime Minister of New Zealand. If people are going, even his mates don't seem to like him, whether that's true or not, because people are asking the questions, there's a problem.
Yeah, but I think the rationale behind it was buy low, sell high. He was having a tough week.
This was your theory.
Yeah, there's already these rumours and stuff going on, and if you only
you picked it.
Well, if you only pick people who seem to be riding high, high, the fall from grace is big. So you got to be thinking this a little bit ahead. Now, I didn't have too much success with it. So Megan Woods, I thought would be a good pick for me because she's energy spokesperson for Labour. And obviously, energy is a tough conversation for the government at the moment. So it didn't get a lot of cut through there. So I think when we're looking at scores total, Tim, we had...
Wait a minute, who was your backbencher?
My backbencher was, who was it? Ruben Davidson from the Labour Party. Seems like a nice guy. Technology, science, all of that stuff. Didn't do anything for me this week, but didn't, cause any trouble either.
So you might put him in your back pocket for next week.
Well, it's the challenge with picking backbenchers is most of the time, most backbenchers don't get cut through on things. And so it's kind of just a wild card. You pick from the list and see who do I think might have a shot. But no dice for me this week. But so when we're looking at our scientific scoring, Chris Luxon did rank on top on raw numbers, but there's a bit of a...
and I think you're introducing the vibes factor.
Yeah, voter impression and broad evaluation score. And so that we're thinking might dial him back a little bit. But number 2 was Shane Jones and number 3 was Chris Hipkins.
Boom.
So Tim just ran the floor with the picks, and I think we declare you the winner for the week.
And so may every select committee podcast end this way. It's not going to happen, guys.
With you winning?
With me winning, yeah. Thank you, Marianne. See, Thomas, learn a lesson. And thank you for your time, attention. We hope we've clarified a few things, and we'll see you next week on the Select Committee. Ka kite.